So, battery energy storage is a huge component right now for our grid, especially here in Texas. And, these batteries, they could be 2-hour batteries, 4-hour batteries, but you can essentially attach them to these uh, substations that need the backup support. And it's a it's a fantastic solution for these short-term outages to prop up the grid. So that's why we're seeing a huge push, especially in Texas right now in the ERCOT market, to get these batteries into play. Um, Pat, I know that you've been working primarily on some pretty large battery energy storage projects all over the country. Are you seeing anything different outside of Texas and your projects that you're running
Not
there?
necessarily. A lot of them are still it's still the same parameters across the board. Through our siting efforts, a lot of the same approach, which is still very relatable. I know all of us initially, and most of the folks in the land organization with the land organization, we were oil and gas prior. My background, I was all surface, and so it's been a pretty easy transition. It's a lot of the same parameters that are set forward, but to answer your question, whether it's in Texas, Illinois, Indiana, wherever it may be, if you're up in the Northeast, it's the same parameters. You want to stay away from water. Your slope wants to be there. What are we looking at in terms of acreage? Once it falls within that, then it's the real challenge. It's getting the folks on board, finding the people. That's a whole nother set of challenges. So.
Yeah. Guys, where do we tend to see siting efforts focus for battery storage? So, or are they throughout the grid, or are they maybe closer to large metropolitan areas? Or are they always set up in conjunction with a solar development, or are they standalone just next to a substation? What kind of scenarios do we see these siting efforts really being
I
focused at?
think
What kind of locations?
it's capacity based, Brent. A lot of them POIs, points of interconnection. You see a lot of the targets initially being placed on those POIs, which can be typically substations. Other folks, they give us the tolerance and clearance to travel along T lines, transmission lines, and kind of give us an allowance as to how far they want to go, whether or not they want to actually tap into that T line, which then feeds back to the substation itself. So it's really a capacity thing and what the queue allows, depending on what market you're in. If you're in ERCOT, MISO, PJM, whatever it may be.
So the key part that ERCOT, for example, is going to dictate where they have capacity or where they need backup reserve capacity. Is that typically kind of what drives a developer, a battery storage developer, to look in a certain area? Or is it tax incentive based? Like, what's the economic driver behind it?
It's both. You're going to have a team of any Indian developers are going to have a team of engineers that are really analyzing and looking at the data for the capacity on the various substations and lines. And then on top of that, they're going to be looking at opportunity zones, community zones, and other types of tax incentives that they can pull from the IRA. And those are going to be like your tier one acreage, right? If they meet all those parameters. But then we're also starting to see a lot of that tier one acreage be secured at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So we're seeing clients move into that tier two acreage. I always say the smart ones are the ones that are getting ahead of the curve and looking at tier three as well. Um, I would anticipate, especially in Texas, the way that this is working with the growth in battery energy storage, that we'll probably see a battery on most substations. And you asked about battery and solar. They're standalone, and then some of them are
Okay.
BESS and PV.
So you'll
So
see
it's both.
you'll
Yeah.
see a project that may have started out as a solar project. They've got land capture. They've got a landowner that's willing to work with them, and maybe now that the market is more supportive of a battery storage campaign or increased battery storage, they can convert that solar project through their contracts they have with the landowner, maybe negotiating a new agreement, and maybe convert a portion of that to a battery storage project. Is that something that you guys see from time to time?
Yes. And let me be clear that we're talking about utility scale battery storage. There's
Yeah.
also distributed battery storage. And so there is a little bit of a difference there. This is basically all focused on utility scale projects,
Okay.
what we're addressing.
All right. So, Blake, I know you're doing some pretty big battery storage projects right now. Natalie pointed out you've got the utility scale, and then you've got maybe the distributed maybe that's terminology. I might have used the right terminology that time. Projects. What's the size? You know, like if you're a landman and you're going to be working on a battery storage project, what can you expect? What kind of directives are we getting as far as the size of these projects? What do you see? What are we shooting
Yeah.
for?
Typically for utility scale type of best project, you're looking for wanting to capture about 20 acres.
Okay.
And there's a little bit of give or take there. The closer you are to the sub, if you could tie directly in, you need a little less. If you're going to have to, get a right of way and build some sort of line to tie it back into the sub or transmission line, you're typically going to need another 10 acres to build some sort of additional infrastructure, switching station to get you tied around.
Okay, so it's not just batteries, it's batteries and then infrastructure that may be necessary to help push that electricity into the grid.
Absolutely.
And then it's also going to depend, your acreage is going to depend on how many megawatts you're going to need for that system. So for utility scale, it may be anything from 100 megawatts to 500 megawatts for a larger project. And the larger the project, the more batteries you're going to need. So when we're talking about batteries, imagine a shipping container, right? And within that shipping container, there's modules. There might be 5 different modules. And within those modules, there might be 100 batteries that slide into that module, right? So the more shipping containers you have, the more megawatts you can produce. And that's where you start getting the additional acreage. Some clients are more condensed in how they place their sites, and they can do more with less. We actually talked to somebody in Replus Atlanta that they were talking about wanting to see if they could start stacking their batteries to use less land.
A smaller footprint.
We'll see this. Yeah, we'll see this innovate. It's going to be very, very cool to watch the technology and how they're approaching these things over the next couple of years.